really getting clear on why you're in business and looking at your packages and pricing and seeing, does your revenue goal that you've just now created actually align with the business model that you have? Do you have the ability to make that type of revenue? I would say that's the number one reason why most businesses are struggling, is they don't have a business model that actually can achieve the revenue that is necessary to actually pay for the things they're desiring.
This is BetterWealth with Caleb Williams. Amber, welcome to the BetterWealth show.
Thanks so much, Caleb. So excited to be here.
I am so excited for this conversation. When we met in January in New York, we were both at like a kind of like a mastermind talking about book strategies, and we just resonated right off the bat. Your love for health, your love for people. Like, it's super evident. If you're not watching this on YouTube, go to YouTube, because it's super evident that Amber loves people. But then you're also your specialty when it comes to money. Now, what's interesting is we kind of joke about this. Anything that makes you rich sells easily. So if I was going to sell some strategy that could 10x your income or whatever, that's easy to sell. But helping people keep more money for some reason is not something that people talk about. And and I want you to talk about the training that you've gotten. I'm a huge fan of Profit First, but you are doing so many things. Like, you're even taking that to the next level. You're working on a book. You're helping people all over the country and all over the world help people keep more of their money. Your message has never been more relevant, by the way, with what's been going on. And so what I want to do is I want this to be like a masterclass. So if you're listening to this or watching this, get your pad and paper out, and you're going to get some key concepts on how you can keep more money and some efficiency hacks. So Amber, without me stealing the show, I want you to give a little bit of your origin story. I want you to talk about a little bit of the Profit First and how you got into that game. And then I want to talk about why you're doing what you're doing. And then I want to get into the nuts and bolts on your specialty.
Okay. Well, Caleb, I honestly did not think that I would ever be in finance or do anything related to finance after leaving my corporate career in corporate finance. And I left as a health coach. I had gone through a certification and decided that after leaving corporate that I really needed to change the scenery. And so I packed my bags and moved to Bali, Indonesia. And I was planning to just be there for 8 weeks. But what happened as I was there was I was connecting with more and more incredible people that were from all walks of life, creating beautiful new companies and startups. And so I was part of this thing called Tribe Wanted. And in this group, we had 50% of the time we were working on our own company, 25% of the time we were helping each other, and the other 25% we were exploring the island. And so during the helping each other portion of the collaboration, most people that are attracted to live in Bali are pretty into health. And so it wasn't really something that people were seeking help with. But what so many people were coming to me about was, how are you handling your cash flow? You don't seem to be very stressed about it. What is your system that you're working on all the time? And so it just started to grow as more and more people were learning about it. So I was asked to do skill shares at the co-working communities there. And then I was asked to do some talks at retreats. And so I started to investigate a bit more and realized that there was a massive hole between really looking backwards in finance, which is what bookkeeping and accounting does, really making sure that we know exactly how much we owe in taxes. And this visionary looking forward, putting intention and purpose to money and making sure that your business is in alignment with making the type of revenue that will really support the life that brings you a high vibration of joy. And so I started to interview more and more people and recognize that, wow, everyone thinks they're alone in this, that they're the only ones struggling with this. And so I looked at that and said, oh my gosh, okay, so I have this holistic health coach background. I've learned really how to create space and listen and allow someone to really be heard and seen and understood. And because money is 99% emotional and behavioral, that's such a key component. But then being able to bring in some practical systems and marrying the feminine and masculine sides of money, that's really where that was born. So I pivoted from health coaching as much as I loved it and really felt that this was my calling and my mission. And it's been amazing ever since.
That's incredible. Okay, so you're in Bali. You stay for you were just going to stay for 8 weeks, but how long did that turn into?
I would probably still be there if I didn't have an incredible love of my life at home. I was there for 6 months, and we actually had a fire in our condo building. And so that was my sign that I probably needed to come back.
And at that time, what made you interested in money? Because you were in the health coach, but were you always just good at just being proactive with your money?
Yeah, so I had an unusual childhood, and this is where I struggled initially with going into this space, because most people go into business with something that they struggled with initially, and that is a really great point to relate with clients, is being able to say, I know how you feel, I've been there. And so I was struggling with that because I did have an unusual childhood where my parents actually instilled savings principles very early on in life. So my very first thing I remember saving for were, I'm not sure if you're familiar with these. I'm a little bit older than you, but the Fisher Price strap-on roller skates. So they were red and blue and yellow, and I think they were $12 at the local True Value store. And I wanted these so badly. And so my grandmother said, all right, well, you get 50 cents in allowance. And what we're going to do is we're going to pay for half of the roller skates, and you need to save for the other half. And you can do additional things around the house if you want to make it a little bit
Cool.
faster. So that was the first thing. And I remember a boombox, a JVC boombox with detachable speakers, and my Walkman, and then a trip to England when I was 12. All of these things I would save up for. And my best friend told me a story just recently, and she said, I remember, Amber, like you've always had this in you, because we were walking around town and I so wanted to get an ice cream cone at Baskin Robbins. And you said, nope, I'm saving for my trip to England. That's going to be money that's going to England. And she just always felt like you had, she says, you had like $2,000. And I think she didn't remember how much she had in her bank account, but she just thought it was so crazy that I had saved so much money. So I think it's just been something that, because of the guidance of my parents, I was very fortunate in learning that in an early stage. But no, it was not something that I necessarily struggled with. And then I went into business and finance because I had done there's this marketing competition in high school. I think it's called DECA.
Yep.
And I had been asked to be a part of this new program that they were doing. It was this International Trade and Business Association course. And so we were going to this other school, and we were sitting in on all of these different meetings, trade association meetings, and then doing DECA competitions. And that's where I really realized that I would get into flow going into marketing conversations and sales conversations and more of the finance side. And because I loved math, I thought that I would love to do finance. And so that's how I got into the finance degree, I guess, as you will, when I was in college.
I love it. So you came back. How did you get connected with Profit First? And for my listeners who have not read the book or are introduced to Mike's philosophy, could you give an overview of what that is and then how you got connected with him?
For sure. So Profit First is a revolutionary way, and it's a very beautiful framework that allows you to look at money from a different perspective. So Mike Michalowicz is the author of Profit First, and he originally self-published this book. So when I came across this book, it was still the first edition. It was self-published, and it was because it had been a little blurb in his toilet paper entrepreneur book of this concept where you basically are paying your business first. And I'll in a minute explain a little bit further what the concepts of Profit First are. So he had it in a blurb. I think it was in a half paragraph in his first book, and so many people were asking about it that he just really felt that the next book needed to be Profit First. And when they went and presented it to Penguin, they said, no, we don't think you need to write this book. And he said, well, I think I do. So he ended up writing it. And then later Penguin came back and said, we really need to publish this book. So now it's out as a full-fledged publication. I came across when it was still the original book. My business coach actually was the one who mentioned it because she knew that as I was pivoting into the money coaching space, I was running a budgeting course for health coaches because I had been in a mastermind for health coaches and many people were asking about it. So I thought, okay, this will be good. I had an idea of how I was going to do the business side, but it still didn't feel 100% right. And after reading the first 3 chapters of the Profit First book, I was up till 2 a.m. I said, this is what's missing.
Yep.
And so instead of doing all the bank accounts, I had already been teaching an envelope system, which is what Profit First is. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Profit First, basically, this is the only equation we'll probably talk about in this conversation, but the general accounting equation of profit is revenue minus revenue minus expenses equals profit. So whatever's left over. And Profit First puts that on its head. And it said, why would we want to just use whatever's left over as profit? Let's be intentional about this. Let's pay ourselves first. Let's put a certain intentional amount aside for profit, and whatever's left over is for expenses. And to take it a bit further, really what you're wanting to do with the money that comes into your business is four main things. You want to be intentionally profitable. You want to be able to consistently pay yourself. You want to have enough money set aside for taxes because you're not paying tax immediately when you make it. And of course, you have business expenses. So you're essentially bringing money in and then putting it into those four piles. And so when I was working with the health coaches, we were reverse engineering this. And I said, for a health coach, we aren't going to have necessarily 3 years of financial statements. And the book talks about that, to kind of analyze what you've done in the past and then make small incremental adjustments to bring your percentages back into balance. And I said, well, for most online entrepreneurs, we're really more focused on exactly what we want to be doing with the money that comes into our business and being very intentional. And so by reverse engineering it, we can get a revenue goal that actually is built up to provide us the amount of revenue that's required for the life we want to be living and for the business investments for our particular business. And so that's how it was born.
Wow. And so you got introduced to his book and you started reading it and you're like, this is amazing. Did you reach out to Mike, or how did you, because you're certified to work with them, and it's my understanding that you're well loved in the Profit First community.
I love them. And yeah, so when I heard about the book and I read it, I said, okay, because integrity is a top value of mine. I couldn't just with integrity teach this framework without talking to them first. So I even told my ladies, I said, you guys, this is going to be worth it, but you have to wait like a week because I don't want to release my original module. So I set up a call with them, and I was actually one of the very first coaches they brought on, because they said most of the time when they were bringing people in, they were going to then teach the framework, but they said, you already have it fully implemented. I said, yeah, because this is so amazing. And this is an envelope system, and this is the system that we use. So they gave me permission to teach it in the way that I currently do, which is really not the framework that they teach with the different bank accounts, et cetera. And so it's been a beautiful relationship ever since. I've done some really awesome collaborations with Mike, and he's just a really incredible person. And he cares so much about the entrepreneur and really making sure that they have everything they need. So it's a really beautiful relationship.
And I remember when we were talking in New York, do you use the envelope system, or is it more the bank account? Because I believe you said that you've used more electronic bank accounts, but I could have misunderstood you.
Yeah, no, I don't use the bank accounts at all. So I actually encourage all of my clients to just keep one bank account if possible, because YNAB, which is the software that I use, it is so much more simple by just having one account, because the software itself thinks of all your money in one big pile, regardless of how many accounts you have open. And the envelopes act as the mini accounts. And so instead of having to open a lot of accounts, we can use the one software system. And what was really exciting actually was I visualized very early on, I really want Jesse Meekum, the founder of YNAB, to meet Mike Michalowicz, because their visions for money and the way they were looking at money were so in alignment. And what's crazy is within 6 months, I was sitting in Manhattan with Jesse and Mike at a table, and we were having a conversation. And it was just so amazing to hear from Jesse as well, how the concept of just switching it around, giving yourself permission to actually spend some of your profit, was revolutionary for him as well. So it's, but yes, I just use that software, which I think is a revolutionary software, and we use it for both business and personal.
Awesome. All right. So now we're going to jump into the masterclass. And I was telling you earlier, we have our BetterWealth model, where on a 2-line graph shows people if they're in balance or not. And over 90% of people that work with us are not financially in balance, meaning they're not saving enough money and their assets aren't working in a way that will continue to give them their standard of living that they're used to living on when you include inflation. So the
Right.
number one thing that we are talking to people about is efficiency hacks, how to find more money. And one of the things that we as a company are looking to get better at is, and that's why I'm bringing people like you on the show, is how do we help people find more money? It's all about cash flow. How do we be proactive with that? And number one person that I thought of was you. And I know that you're working on a book on this, and I know that you help people all over the country and all over the world about how to do this. So without further ado, I want to give you just the space and freedom to kind of like lay out a roadmap of how my listeners who are entrepreneurs, who are people that work for entrepreneurs and corporate America, investors, a framework of how they can start thinking about their money so that they can actually keep more and profit more.
Absolutely. Okay, so there are some key concepts here to really help you see the full picture. And so a lot of times when we're thinking about a personal budget, for example, we may think of the words restriction or not being able to actually enjoy it. And what it really is just a roadmap of your intentions for yourself. And a lot of times we skip a whole category of expenses that I call true expenses. And so, for example, if you are able to sit down and list out all of your normal fixed monthly expenses, your variable expenses, but then take it a step further and ask yourself, what are other things I spend my money on that I know I want to have money available for, such as travel, such as spending around December, holiday spending, and perhaps even saving up for a new car before you actually have to get a new car and just making yourself a monthly payment. When you have these things all laid out as well, you get a higher number than you may have subconsciously planted in your mind is what you really need per month for yourself. And so having that key number, first of all, is going to help you then understand, okay, I actually may need to be either making more money or seeing what's truly what I need to be spending on, that I want to spend on. So from an entrepreneur's perspective, I have 5 key things that I believe you really want to have for a profitable and sustainable business. And so it can really help someone who isn't necessarily an entrepreneur either. You just will be looking at it from a slightly different standpoint. Because whether your revenue is coming from your business or coming from a job and several jobs or several revenue streams, you're thinking of it just the same. It's money coming in. And so the very first thing that I suggest is having a very clear revenue goal that's absolutely unique to your situation. So what this does is this ensures that you're striving to bring in more money than you're spending, and you're still preparing for paying for taxes, putting intentional profit aside, and also saving and allocating money for those true expenses that I mentioned. And what this does is it allows you to really feel confident that the number that you've now calculated is truly going to give you the resources required to do the different things that you want to be doing. And that can help you then with your packages and your pricing, because you may find that, and this is something that I see really interesting as people leave corporate and move into an entrepreneurial space. A lot of times they will be bringing in roughly the amount that their take-home pay was in their corporate job. And this is what I call a set income point. And so people who have been used to receiving, let's say, $5,000 a month, well, then they start bringing in $5,000 a month in their business, and they think that that's great. Okay, I'm bringing in $5,000, but obviously we're not taking into account the tax that you're going to have to pay on top of just the regular income taxes, but also the employer paid taxes that you're going to have to pay. And of course, you want to be putting aside intentional profit, and you are going to have business expenses. And just the dynamics have changed since you've been in business, in your employee role. So having that revenue goal, which sometimes can feel like ripping the Band-Aid off a little bit. And so anytime I take someone through this process, it's really important that we set the expectation and also the grace of, yes, okay, I know that this is going to be an interesting experience and it is what it is. But once you are given, when you give yourself the gift of knowledge of this is my new number, and then take a walk, allow yourself to just breathe it in, then you can start seeing amazing opportunities come your way of how you can actually hit that number.
Yeah.
So that's,
and can I just say something
of
here?
course, yeah.
I think one of the things that we talk about is you are your number one asset. And the biggest thing that I see opportunities, especially for younger people or someone in business, is like, how do you make more money? And it's really cool, just going back to what you're saying, is if you have that number in your mind, opportunities will start coming to you. And then the things that you're saying yes to that are not really making a difference, hopefully you can start sifting out what are the things that you should be focusing your time on, what are the things that you should be saying no to. And so I want to echo that. That's very much how we plan our business. I won't say yes to something if it doesn't give us X, Y, or Z to our business, and we're very clear about that. And then you're saying figure out that number, but also figure out that number as it relates to how much money you need just for taxes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's tax and the business expenses and your own personal that you
Okay.
want to be paying every month, plus intentional profit. And that intentional profit is actually where you're automatically going to be starting to accumulate and age money in your business. And you can do the same thing in your personal life as well. So for example, if you know after doing the calculator on BetterWealth, and you can see, okay, this is how much I need to actually be saving every year, you can incorporate that into your revenue goal calculation and say, okay, well, if I need 20,000 extra a year, divide that by 12, that's a true expense for yourself. So you put that in to the whole system, and then you come up with a number. And then it's like, okay, we all love challenges. We all love that, especially as entrepreneurs, looking at this as like, oh, okay, how am I going to make that happen? And I remember doing this for myself and sitting, I always take 2 weeks, and we go usually to an Airbnb somewhere in the middle of winter, right after Christmas. And I was sitting there on the floor of this Airbnb, and I was looking at the numbers, and the package price that I needed to charge was way more than what I was charging. And I just remember sitting right there and saying, you know what? Okay, this is what's going to have to happen. And so everything shifted after that. And so when people go through that process, you have more confidence as well, because you can say, okay, well, in order to thrive, be sustainable, and truly be available for those that I am serving, I must fill my cup first. And once you do that, you can become incredibly generous, because when you have additional money on top of the revenue goal coming in, it is so easy to be incredibly generous with that, because your cup's already full. So that's the first thing, is just knowing how much you actually want to be bringing in to cover the things that you want to be paying for. The second thing, especially for a business, is having a revenue forecast tool so that you can see and be proactive in the revenue that's coming in. So if you notice, okay, you've listed out all of your payments from your different clients and from your different revenue streams, and you're comparing it to the amount of money you want to be bringing in, you can then look and see, I see there's a dip 4 months from now. Okay, so what can we do to start proactively engaging or bringing in a new revenue stream, or perhaps opening up a couple of spots to work with me, or, whatever it is, but being able to do that now, because you have the aged money, you have the system in place that's seeing how much you want to have coming in and know exactly where to allocate it. And now the third piece can look at it and say, okay, well, in order to maintain this consistent level or higher, these are the things I need to be doing now. So instead of feeling like you're reacting because there's, $1,000 in the business bank account and you have $5,000 of bills due the next month or the next week, instead you're looking at it from a longer term perspective, but in the exact same way. It's just you no longer have this pressure of time, and the contaminated time of worrying about the timing of cash flow is completely lifted. So it completely opens up your creative space as well, because you can now truly focus on the impact that you want to make with your clients and not on the timing of cash flow. So the first one's a revenue goal calculator. The second one's a revenue forecast tool. The third one is where everyone goes, oh, really? And it's the personal spending plan, or i.e. a budget. And when I say this, I mean it to truly be a list of your most highest priorities. That's all this is. It's giving you freedom to spend the money on the things you want to be spending, and also being able to put aside money for those true expenses that we talk about. So let's say that you have $10,000 a month in expenses, including your fixed expenses, your true expenses. And I never suggest having just blanket savings. That should always be something specific, whether it's for retirement or for a new home or for a new car or for travel or for taking a friend on a dream trip that she never expected, that kind of thing. When you have very specific things that you've listed out, it's harder to take from that amount that's accumulating than just a blanket savings. So if I see a client that has a savings account, I say, well, what is it for? Oh, I don't know, an emergency, and I say, well, okay, that's great. You have it. It's always good to say, or to acknowledge the fact that the intention is amazing. Now take a step back and say, what is it that you actually want to do with this money so that you're not taking from it for something that's not as important or not as intentional?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the third thing, is a personal spending plan. And what this really does is it ensures that you don't sabotage your newfound profitability in your business. Because what happens is when you implement a system like Profit First, or really becoming more clear and in control of the cash flow in your business, you'll see that it can be really easy to have the business be sabotaged by personal spending. Because when you start making additional money, it's easy to then say, oh, well, let's elevate my lifestyle as well at the same time. And I'm all for having a life that feels amazing and for really, spending things on things that bring you joy. But it's always you want to do that with the holistic perspective of, okay, I'm putting enough money aside here for my long-term goals. And I'm putting money aside here for the things that I know are coming up the next year or 2 years or 3 years. And so that really helps you do that when you have a very intentional plan that's simple. Money is simple. We try to make it super complicated with all these investment strategies and, a lot of different verbiage that's thrown around. But ultimately, cash flow management is, if we didn't have any electronics, it would be taking money in, seeing a big pile of it, and then organizing it into envelopes that have labels. And that's all we're doing.
And it's super interesting. I would definitely want to follow up after our podcast on the software that you mentioned, because in the and asset, a lot of our clients are saving into, an and asset, which we talked about. And it's like they're saving for a purpose. And they might have, some might be emergency, some might be an opportunity, some might be for college, and so it's like, really, I love this idea of spending a spending plan and having every dollar accounted for on why you're saving it, and understanding that has a long-term consequence and also a short-term consequence. So I love the spending plan, and it's so much more freeing than the word budget, but it really truly is. It's like every dollar has a place.
Absolutely. And that's one of their main rules in the software that I use. They say every dollar has a job. Yeah, and what it does is it keeps the perspective of a dollar. Because, we've all been there. If we have $20 in cash in our pocket, and we go into a fancy store and we don't have anything else but the $20, if you see something for $25, that's over what you have, right? But if you have $1,000 in your pocket, then a $25 thing doesn't really mean all that much. But what a spending plan allows you to do is see and continue to keep the perspective of the value of a dollar. So even if you have $50,000 in your checking account, if you have $100 allocated for a particular intention or purpose, you have to decide if you want to now change your priority and say, okay, you know what? Actually, I want to spend more money in this area. I'm going to move it from another priority. So it gives you more perspective of the opportunity cost of spending money in a different area. So that's where a budget fails in a lot of ways, because it doesn't have you reallocate the remaining funds, whereas a $0 budget or an envelope system does.
Yep. I love it. I love it.
Awesome. Okay, so that's the third thing, is a personal spending plan. And then, of course, if you have a business, the business also is so helpful to have a spending plan for the business. And I'm not talking about, a forecast at the beginning of the year and then you don't look at it again. It's a true, every dollar has a job for the business. And this is where you can implement components of Profit First. So what this does is it allows you to, no matter how much money you're making, if you have ups and downs in variable incomes, so let's say you have a big launch and you make $200,000 that month, and the next 2 months you're making, maybe $50,000 or $60,000 a month. You can allow yourself to reallocate the larger amount coming in over several months so that you can have consistent revenue, consistent income, consistent paying of bills. And it allows you to be very intentional with that money. So instead of it all coming in and being spent right away, you're intentionally putting aside the money you will be owing on taxes. You intentionally put money away for profit. And then you see the amount of money sitting there for owner's pay, so you know how much you have available to pay yourself. And this is such a game changer for businesses because it can help you with so many strategic decisions. When you want to bring on new team members, when you want to see if your business can handle a new coaching expense, you can look at it and you can say, okay, what has been the last 6 months average revenue that's been in my business? Recalculate a revenue goal with the new expenses that you've added in there, and then compare that with the average. And you can see right away whether or not your business can handle it. If not, you now see a new revenue goal you want to be hitting. You can then go back to your pricing, your packages. You can see, how can we make this happen? And then once you start hitting that new goal, you can start putting aside money for that new position or that new expense for 2 to 3 months, so that you now have a buffer before you bring that person on. And it can feel so amazing, because when someone comes on, they don't usually hit the ground running and immediately start making revenue for the company. They need a little bit of time to acclimate. And this allows you to do that feeling really good about it because you've put aside money for that. So that's just one example of how a spending plan can really help the business. And then, of course, the last thing is having a plan to achieve your financial goals and age your money. So this is something that we were talking about earlier, Caleb. Aging money, especially in today's condition, is such an incredibly important concept, because we don't actually, of course, we don't know what's happening in the future. We don't know what's happening tomorrow. And it's important to have, instead of just blanket savings, seeing our monthly spending in buckets. So we can say, okay, for example, the concept aged money is, if you did not have a single penny come into your bank account, how long could you have regular expenses be covered before you ran out of money? So if someone has 6 months of aged money, they have 6 months of expenses sitting in their bank account. And this is something that allows so much anxiety to dissolve, so much stress to dissolve, because when you're making money to fund a month, 6 months in the future, not today.
You're not living in that. You're not living month to month. You're 6 months out. Can I ask why 6 months? Because I tend to default to a year, but it could be that, that's just my personal preference.
Yeah. So I always tell people up to a year is great. So you just want to decide for yourself what you feel is best. My default is 6, but some people feel comfortable with 3. Some people feel comfortable with 12. Some people want more than 12. And that's when I just encourage them to do something different with their money past 12 months. But yes, I have clients who have a full 12 months saved, and there are others that do 6. But it really is just what you are comfortable with. And what's interesting, that as I've worked with more and more people, we all have a particular set income point and a set point where we feel really comfortable in terms of aged money. And it has to do a lot with both our own knowledge and also our experience as we were children.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you mentioned opportunity cost and also explained age money, because I think that's just a really powerful concept. And so let's talk about, you obviously work with people a lot. What are some common frustrations or downfalls or mistakes people are making as it relates to creating a revenue goal, creating a forecast, which, by the way, forecasts are difficult. I don't know if that's one of the reasons why it's powerful to have people like you, because that can just be difficult to do on your own. So I'm curious about that. And then creating a spending plan for your business and for yourself. What kind of mistakes are you seeing when you're meeting with people making as it relates to their money around this?
Well, I have to say, most people that I meet with, they have really struggled to know where to start.
Yeah.
So everyone's intention is very, very pure, and I know something's off here, and it takes so much courage to have that conversation. So for every single person I speak to, I know there's 100 people who are feeling the same thing and haven't had the ability to have that conversation yet. Yeah. So I would say, for the most part, it's just truly not knowing, because they don't know where they need to start. So once people do start the process, I think where they're most surprised is how easy it is to actually go and do all of this, and the thought of putting in those true expenses that they hadn't thought of. And I would say that's the biggest epiphany, is seeing, wow, my revenue goal is way higher than I thought it needed to be. And it can take a little bit of time of adjusting to that concept, because so I would say, just without them even recognizing that this is a mistake they're doing, I think the revenue goal setting is much lower than it needs to be, would be the first thing. In terms of forecasting, I actually depends on the person I'm speaking to. So some of my clients are incredibly creative, visionary people who really, before me, have never touched a spreadsheet. And I make sure my spreadsheets are very beautiful and aesthetically pleasing and fun to use so that it doesn't seem like a spreadsheet, because most people don't want to use it. But when they come to me, they're thinking in terms of expansive abundance. And so having a forecast, it's really important for them to have kind of the bigger picture forecast where they can really see and play with launches and programs that are being developed, et cetera. But I suggest having a very concrete forecast of given booked revenue, and use that for your strategic planning. And every business is going to be a bit different, but most of the businesses I work with are online business owners that are able to have the autonomy to really choose how they're working with clients on a dime, and change things pretty quickly. So what I suggest is keeping a really clear, detailed list of actual payments that are coming in each month. So if they have membership sites or if they have group programs, that they're listing those by payment, not by booked revenue. So that's actually bringing another good point. I think that I see people make the mistake of only focusing on the booked revenue number and not looking at the actual cash flow that's coming in every month.
Yep.
So if someone is doing pay in fulls and they're receiving all the money in the beginning, then if they're not dripping that out over the time that they're actually working with those clients, they will be in a position where no money's coming in. They may have spent all the money that they booked,
Yep.
and they'll have these deliverables to meet. And that's where you can really be in a pickle, because you're not able to have the bandwidth to take on new client work until you finish with them and you're not receiving any money. So that's a big one for sure.
Wow. Yeah. There's just so much. Is there any software or any resources that you recommend if someone's like just a little bit like, thank you, Amber, and there's a lot here. What kind of resources do you recommend, or where to start? I know that you have a community and they could work with you and your team. So what kind of resources are there to really get your cash flow figured out?
Yeah, so I mean, we run regular aged money challenges where we take you through listing all of the things that you want in your personal life, listing all the things in your business, really getting clear on why you're in business and looking at your packages and pricing and seeing, does your revenue goal that you've just now created actually align with the business model that you have? Do you have the ability to make that type of revenue? I would say that's the number one reason why most businesses are struggling, is they don't have a business model that actually can achieve the revenue that is necessary to actually pay for the things they're desiring.
Yep.
So that's a really key thing. So we do that in these challenges. We also have recently amended it for this current situation, because many of us are not spending money on things that we normally spend on, whether it be childcare or massages or nails or anything like that, because we're not going anywhere. So we have this new setup, which I'm really excited about, because you can list everything and then you can designate it as a must-have, a nice-to-have, a future, or a need-to-cancel expense. And this helps you really get clear on the things you need to cancel. That's the very first thing we want you to do. And then, of course, looking at the different revenue goal levels to see where you want to start with and feel energetically aligned with, because that's the other important thing. We can make any amount of money. We are all capable of infinite amount of revenue. Revenue and money are renewable resources. But until we are in the capacity to receive that, we may shut ourselves off from higher amounts of revenue. So we come up with these different revenue goals, and it's a really beautiful process. So we have this next one coming up in September. I think we're starting the second week of September, but we have a wait list if you're listening to this after that. That is a really great place to start. And of course, I will always sing to the rooftops, you need a budget. It's an incredible envelope software that is really the basis of our entire framework.
Awesome. Let's switch gears a little bit. How do you define better wealth?
I would define better wealth as intentionally allocated wealth. So when you're really looking at every dollar is a precious commodity. And for example, I say all the time, I have this, $300 fountain pen that I love writing with. It is a beautiful experience. And that was not an overspend for me. But spending $3 on an InkJoy pen is an absolute waste of money because I don't like those pens. And so I would say that Better Wealth is really being intentional with every dollar you have and being grateful for what you currently have.
What is one thing that you're doing that's really working right now in life?
Oh my gosh, intermittent fasting. It is the most incredible. I feel like I would give up all my money to
no, really?
yes, to know this, because it is, I believe, the key to true health for everyone that's struggling with metabolic syndrome right now. We have a beautiful way to heal ourselves. And the autophagy process that happens when you go into a fasted state is incredible. And there's been nothing that has been developed pharmaceutically that has come close to the results that you can get from doing a fast. So hands down, since we've met, Caleb, I've lost almost 34 pounds.
Wow.
I never struggled with my weight until I started my business. And I gained over 50 pounds starting my business 5 years ago. And I was on my mind all the time. And I went to Portugal right after we met. And I met this incredible couple from Toronto. They run a naturopathic clinic and functional medicine clinic. And they introduced me to this concept. I've gone dive into learning all about it because I was already really into the health space, but I was still struggling so much. And it's been this fasting that has totally changed my life. And I feel amazing. And I'm on a 3-day or a 5-day, it's called a fasting mimicking diet by Dr. Longo. It's Prolon. So I'm on day 3. And the mental clarity that you get from fasting is incredible. So I was really excited to see that we were having this conversation on the day where you really start to really get into that mental clarity space. So the amount of insight I've gotten just from being in a fasted state has been incredible. So
when you say intermittent, are you fasting for 5 days?
This is a fasting mimicking diet. So there's a very low calorie, but it's to really keep the nourishment and nutrition up while you're still doing, it's basically tricking your body as if you were doing a 5-day water fast.
Interesting. And now intermittent, do you not eat after dinner usually? And then what does intermittent fasting look like for you?
So for me personally, I usually wake up in the morning, I meditate, I have my black coffee with mushrooms, and then I don't actually eat until usually the late afternoon. So I'll drink lots of water and herbal teas and things like that. And then I'll have a very satiating meal, sometimes a snack and a meal. And then I close my window pretty early because I've found using this Aura Ring, which has been a game changer in just learning so much about my body and what different things work. I've learned that if I can stop eating sooner, it is so much better for deep sleep and so much better for sleep in general. So, so I usually open the window in the early afternoon and close it usually around 4 o'clock or 5 at the latest. And that's what I do.
And then, wow. Okay. There are a couple of things I want to go. It's so funny because those that listen to this show a lot, I love health and wellness, and like the Aura Ring is something I'm looking into. And I've heard from multiple people, by the way, because this is a common question I usually ask off air that I'm asking more on air, is just like what you're doing health wise. And there's multiple very successful entrepreneurs that are hacking their sleep and also are really trying to design their life to perform optimally, because it's like, and it's going back to your other question or that you answered on intentional living. That's why we exist at BetterWealth. You have one life, live it intentionally. If you get your money thing figured out, it can help you live a more intentional life. Absolutely. So I didn't pay Amber to say that, by the way, in case you're wondering.
See, this is why we connected so immediately when we first met. I felt your energy, and then I heard your message, and I said, what? Oh, this is crazy. And I knew that was the reason I was there that day, was to meet you.
Right. Well, same. Out of all the people that I met, some incredible people there, I go, I'm going to do something with Amber because my community needs the practical, nuts and bolts that you're teaching. And there's some things that we're teaching at BetterWealth that I just go really, really hand in glove with what you're teaching. And so I'm just really excited about that. Last question before we ask the legacy question, 3 books that you would recommend somebody. I know that's a super general question, but I just know that a lot of leaders are readers, and I just love to get your answer on that.
Love this question, because guess what? 2 weeks ago, I went through all my books and rearranged them so that I could have my most referred to ones right here. So I'll just take it off the top. This is the first one, Psycho-Cybernetics. Love this one. The Big Leap, obviously, I'm sure many people talk about this one. And then these kind of go, I can't say top 3.
Well, you can pick whatever. I picked 3. Just not
okay, so I'm going to just quickly, these 2 are incredible. The Tapping into Wealth and The Soul of Money. These are, Tapping into Wealth by far is the one that I reach to all the time to help people really break through money blocks. And it's using the EFT, the emotional freedom technique, scientifically proven to really help take out some of the anxiety around money. And the last one that I'll mention is Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which you probably can't see here.
Yep.
Yeah. But of all of those, I would definitely say Tapping into Wealth, Psycho-Cybernetics, and The Big Leap. Yep, those 3.
Awesome. And we will have those just in the show notes as well, because I just, again, love that. And obviously, if you're listening to this on our podcast, or if you're watching this on YouTube, one of the things that Amber and I are going to be looking into is doing more just specific videos on topics, because there's so much wisdom being dropped here. Amber, the way that I love to end this podcast is with the legacy question. And the legacy question goes like this. This is your last day on earth. You're with the people that you love the most. You have all of your experience and wisdom. What are you going to pass on through that last conversation with those that you love the most?
Pursue the things that you enjoy. That's what my grandfather told me, and that's what's fueled me ever since.
I love it. And you are an example of someone that's living that well. How can people connect on with you and what you're doing and just get involved in this? And I want to say again, stay tuned for what's to come, because I think you're going to be really excited about the content that's going to be created. But how can people connect with you?
Well, they can definitely come into our free community. It's called Sweet Life Purposeful Money on Facebook. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's just Amber Duggar on there. And also on Instagram at profit.with.amber. Those are great places to go.
And we will have...
I was just going to say, and of course, if you want to get a revenue goal calculation, you can go to amberduggar.com/calculator, and you'll be able to put in your numbers, and make sure you do it with BetterWealth, because then you can see exactly how much you want to be saving and put that into your calculation for your revenue goal.
I absolutely love it. We'll have all those links down in either the YouTube description or on podcasts. Make sure to check that out. And Amber, thank you so much. I am grateful that you're in my life, and I'm grateful for the message that you have. And I cannot wait to promote your book, because I know it's going to be epic. So thank you again for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Caleb. It has been an absolute honor.
Thank you so much for listening to the BetterWealth podcast. It would mean the world to me if you could hit subscribe, leave a review, and share this with the people that you know and love.